When I first started teaching, I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Matthew Curnier, or Mr. Curnier. I'll be a science teacher. And I just got met with a sea of blank, confused student faces. So I just went, do you know what, guys? We'll just Mr. C. So actually, my entire career, I've been known as Mr. C.
Mr. C. Okay, there we go. Well, that works for me too.
With the pressure and the resources that are under pressure in schools, we can't cater in the same way as we would like to. One of the things that I'd love to see, for example, is classrooms no more than 24 strong, but inevitably we've got classrooms of 33 or 32 or whatever it might be. Slowly but surely, I think the repertoire of what we consider education, or the diet of what we consider education, is broadening beyond that of the school. I do fervently believe that there are people in this world who are born just with an inherent native ability to be good teachers. Because I am a teacher, for me, creating a tutoring company that uses teachers is just simply what I know.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome to the 128th episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. I know, big surprises.
Wow, 128. I'm impressed.
My name is Ludo Miller, the host of this podcast. Welcome back to regular listeners. Welcome to any of you for whom this is your first time listening to the Qualified Tutor Podcast. And of course, a huge welcome to today's guest, Matthew Curnier. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited.
For the French-speaking contingent of our listeners, my guest today is actually Mathieu Curnier. But I was asking Matthew just now how the pronunciation works, and apparently Curnier is fine in English. So that's how Matthew is known to many, I'm sure, of the schools he works with.
Well, that's actually a funny anecdote, because when I first started teaching, I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Matthew Curnier, or Mr. Curnier. I'll be a science teacher. And I just got met with a sea of blank, confused student faces. So I just went, do you know what, guys? We'll just Mr. C. So actually, my entire career, I've been known as Mr. C.
Mr. C. Okay, there we go. Well, that works for me too. Now, just as a brief background to Mr. C, for any of you who haven't come across Matthew or his business, Matthew is as he was saying just then, a former classroom teacher, and is the director and founder of Capital Tuition Group, which is a tutoring business founded, run by and built on a team of just under 100 highly experienced, very successful teachers. And it's a model that's worked wonders for the business, and Matthew has been right at the heart of the business since it launched about kind of around 5 years ago. Now, Matthew is also an actor who's appeared in several short films, which no doubt helps to bring a great deal of flair and exuberance and performance to the education environment. I'm sure sessions with Matthew are a whole lot of fun. But Matthew, welcome to this podcast. It's really, really great to have you on.
Thank you.
What is giving you reason to smile today, Matthew? Tuesday the 30th of August. What's giving you reason to smile?
Oh my gosh, what's giving me a reason? Well, first of all, I think this is the first time I've ever been invited to record on a podcast. So that's a first for me and something I can scratch off my bucket list. So if that doesn't give me reason to smile, I don't know what will.
Hopefully that smile won't have been wiped off by the end of the next 25 minutes or so. But Matthew, we listeners of this podcast will know that we tend to start this each episode with a little look back to the very early days of our guests' lives and careers. Now, I gather locating some physical school reports was not possible, but there is a little tale you have to tell from all those years ago.
Yeah. So this is it's almost a direct quote, and it is from a school report, an end of year report. I think I must have been about year 8 or year 9 or something like that. And it was from my PE teacher. Now, I actually really like sport, and I'm like being sportsmanly and getting active and fit and all the rest of it. But I actually hated PE when I was at school, and I didn't particularly like my PE teacher, who always sort of found reason to pick on me a little bit. But I think we'd just done a term or whatever we'd done was rugby. Now, I quite like rugby and did quite well in that. I can't kick a round ball to save my life. So football was always more of a challenge. But the end of school report that I had from my PE teacher was Matthew lacks the appropriate motor skills to become a good footballer, which I took great exception to, even though he was right. Because I have motor skills for other things, and it was always something that struck me. And my mum and my dad, when they read this report, literally couldn't stop laughing for about 2 weeks. Forevermore, I've been known as someone with poor motor skills. Despite the fact that I probably should say that I did actually go on to be sort of quite a good gymnast, which I think probably requires a little bit of motor skills.
Perhaps more than football, actually. Well,
anyway,
it's funny how often people we have on the podcast talk about the comments they received from teachers when they were children, and how it spurred them to really go against what their teacher said. You know, this real kind of deep, powerful feeling of like, I can't believe you said that. I'm now going to go and prove you wrong.
Yeah.
But equally, we have had guests who said, oh, yeah, my pottery teacher said I'd never make it as a potter. So that was the last day I ever did. You know, the kind of...
Oh, no, like really, it cuts them there and then.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, they'll, science will never be for them. Okay, I'm not doing science at A-level kind of thing. But no, that's a great little tale. I wonder if it spurred you on, Matthew, to do what you do today. Do you think there's a reason behind what you were like as a kid that is why you do what you do today?
Well, there is. Well, in terms of this PE teacher, I kind of very quickly forgot about it, and I was like, oh, whatever. And my immediate thought was, this guy has no idea who I am, or has bothered to find out who I am. That's the first thing. So, my sympathies do go out to people who have taken to heart, because it did cut the comment, but my sympathies do go out to people who do receive comments in a report or either verbally from a teacher, somebody who's in a position of responsibility and authority, that sort of discourages them or stops them. I really think that's not right. It happens, and we all make mistakes, and I'm sure that I will have said things as a teacher that I probably wish I could have said differently. But on the flip side, there are really amazing stories which are where teachers I think have a really important role to play, and that is that of my biology A-level teachers. So I had 2 biology A-level teachers. They were a married couple, actually, and they were called Mr. and Mrs. Smale, and it was Mr. Smale who I got on really, really well with. And it was because of him that I ended up going on to study biology and zoology, because he himself had been that, and he was just so passionate about the natural world and all of that entailed. And actually, incidentally, I dedicated my master's thesis to him because just before I'd finished my master's, he unfortunately passed away of cancer. So I thought, here is a man that has really been an incredible signpost for me in life, and that's the least I could offer him as a gesture of a thank you, really.
Yeah, Yeah, I think the impact that teachers have can be
Yeah.
so powerful, both positively and negatively, as we've just talked about. Um, Now, Matthew, there's obviously you were a classroom teacher before you launched Capital Tuition Group.
Yeah.
What made you turn to tutoring from your teaching days?
Yeah, I think that was an accumulation of a variety of factors all coming to a head. So I'd been teaching since 2009. I was head of year at the time, and I'd been made head of year. So I saw my year group through. So I was head of year 9, then 10, then 11. My head teacher who's a really incredible man, a chap called Alex Russell, who's actually recently been um, awarded or knighted an OBE. I don't know. Do you get awarded an OBE or knighted an OBE? I don't know what you get. Anyway, he got an OBE
He's just smashed
for
it.
his services to education, and I was very privileged to be able to work with him. Now, so I spent a long time in the classroom. I'd kind of seen my year group through. He had set me a challenge. Alex had set me a challenge. Like, I want this year to be one of the best years that we get in terms of our results. So I just sort of, as a young, keen, green teacher, was just poured blood, sweat, and tears into the whole thing, which was fantastic, and the results were very, very good, etc. And I also, at the same time, wanted to move into London. I was living in Surrey at the time, and I kind of wanted to move into London. And sort of at the same time, he then offered me the opportunity to become what's known in the business as an SLE, which is a specialist leader in education, which meant that I got the opportunity to go around a variety of schools and help improve the teaching and learning in science departments, either before Ofsted or after Ofsted, or just by virtue of let's have a check-in. And that was really, really great. And that was the thing that on the side, I thought, well, I can supplement my income and my revenue by doing a bit of tutoring on the side, seeing as now I have more time as a consultant rather than as a classroom teacher, which I perhaps didn't really have before when I was also a head of year. So that's kind of, it's just sort of an organic, natural move into tutoring rather than an active leaving of the classroom.
Yeah, and really nice that it wasn't impacted by any negative events that you'd had, or anything that had come towards the end of, you know, seeing classroom teaching for something that you hadn't seen it as when you first started.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize just quite how much hard work it was, but at the same time, it was something that I really loved, and the energy that you put, the energy that it requires is something that was really fueling. I think almost everyone that I worked with in the school, because we were a school that was in special measures, and there was a big, big drive to sort of get it out of that sort of predicament, and we were very successful in doing so. And there's a wonderful sense of team and belonging and greater purpose, or big objective that we were all working towards. That was just such a joy to be involved with, really.
Yeah, so I mean, you saw the power of classroom teaching firsthand.
Yeah.
Now, tutoring has something that has grown rather a lot since you began.
Just a bit, just a bit.
Don't know if it's anything to do with you joining the industry or not, but
Flattery will get you everywhere.
yeah, exactly. Why then, Matthew, do you think that tutoring has taken this role? How do you think it's come to be where it is today?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of reasons as to why tutoring is being endorsed more and more, or being sought more and more. I think the first and most obvious one is the pandemic. The pandemic, arguably put a lot of pressure on our young students and our young people and children. And I think it's important that we assist them in sort of catching up that time. And I'm using air quotes very specifically because, I know that it's not, I think it is slightly taboo to use the word catch up, but there is an element of that. I think the pandemic did create a divide, not only between those who have and those who have not, in terms of resources or parents at home who can look after them and help with homeschooling or whatever, but also there will also have been a divide between those who did do and those who didn't do. And there is a link between the two. Obviously, there's a link between the two. So I think the reason why the tutoring industry has grown is because there is sort of, a cognizance that there is a gap and that we need to sort of fill it. and really bring our students on to where they should be, again, using air quotes. Another fact, so that's one reason. I think another reason is that slowly but surely, I think the repertoire of what we consider education, or the diet of what we consider education, is broadening beyond that of the school. So I think, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't know what time frame necessarily to put on it, is I think we generally thought that schools, kids went to school, they did their learning at school, then they'd come home, do their homework, and that was it. And I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore. And I think in other countries, particularly the Far East, and China in particular, Singapore, Malaysia, all these places really put a huge onus on education. Tutoring has always been there to supplement and support all the good stuff that's happening in the school grounds and in the classroom itself. And I think that, for very pro-education families, or for people who are particularly ambitious, they want to bring that into part of the diet that constitutes what we consider education to be. And I think that's kind of right, because I'm not sure anymore, and I hope this isn't too controversial a statement, but with the pressure that, and the resources that are under pressure in schools, we can't cater in the same way as we would like to. One of the things that I'd love to see, for example, is classrooms no more than 20, 24 strong, but inevitably we've got classrooms of 33 or 32 or whatever it might be. And I think so there, we can't cater for everyone as well as we might. There are also a greater number of needs, in terms of special educational needs or whatever. And so I think having tutoring for that is a really good way of making sure that a student can keep on accessing the education and the levels of academia that they're supposed to be doing so in school. So there's a variety of reasons why I think there's just some of them. But I do think that the trend in the growth of tutoring is something that we will happily see continue.
Yeah, and we were speaking before, Matthew, about the use of qualified teachers as tutors, and whether that's post-retirement or alongside, as you said, to earn to improve their earning power. And this is something that you know a lot about, and that's why it was one of the primary reasons for asking you to be on this podcast, was because of that perspective and how well that's worked for Capital Tuition Group. A two-part question, really, but why the focus at Capital Tuition Group on qualified teachers? And the second part of the question is, what makes a good tutor?
Yeah, I think straight off the bat, because I am a teacher, for me, creating a tutoring company that uses teachers is just simply what I know. And understanding education as I do within the context of being a secondary school teacher, I just was like, well, it just makes so much sense. I'll also just, when I sort of started my master's, I did actually try my hand at a bit of biology tutoring. And I thought, I'd do some tutoring sessions, like, yeah, I'm quite good at this. Yeah, all good. And then a few years later, when I did end up becoming a qualified teacher, I then did some tutoring again. I went and I realized I probably wasn't that good, or not as good as I thought I'd been. And that was simply because of the fact that I had opened a biology A-level textbook, tried a lesson, saw that it didn't particularly work very well. I needed to re-explain it in a different, better way using simpler examples. I needed to scaffold it perhaps to a greater degree to allow my students to access it. All of that kind of lovely stuff you can only but glean if you're a classroom teacher was something that made sense in my head as to what would almost not guarantee, but certainly make sure to a much greater extent, I would be introducing tutors to families and to clients that knew what they were doing and knew how to do it, not just at a basic level, but really, really well. Because in education, I think one of the things that we talk about a lot in continued professional development is value added, and how our practice as teachers is really conferring actual education, and the metrics around that are wide and varied, and it's difficult to measure education, right? We all understand that. And so there is inevitably quite a lot of focus on our CPD, and I do think generally that will then give a a level of reassurance to people who are seeking tutoring. And let's, not beat about the bush. A lot of people who come to ask us for tutoring and support academically and in whatever subject it might be is because for two main reasons. One, they're struggling, they're underconfident, and they just need a bit of reassurance, a bit of help, a bit of guidance to boost and inevitably to boost their grade. Or they're really, really competent students who have got a huge amount of ambition. They're aiming for the top of the tops. They're wanting to get the A stars, or level 9s if they're doing GCSEs. They're aiming for Oxbridge or really prestigious universities around the world. And they need to be getting absolutely every single mark out of the exam paper. Yeah. So who's going to be the best at doing that, in my opinion, is someone who's studied exam questions, exam papers, people who have probably been examiners as well, people who read examiners' reports from AQA or from edXL or whatever. And not even all teachers do that. So it just made sense to me that for those two categories of students, we were going to be providing a service, or my tutors were going to be providing a service that was going to match those requirements.
Yeah, there's no arguing with that, and you can see it time and time again when you speak to parents. They say, I want the reassurance. There's so many tutors to choose from. I don't know who to choose. It's such a minefield out there. So I'm going to choose a qualified teacher who I know has been through the system and has gone through those other things that we must have in tutoring, the safeguarding elements, the understanding of curriculum, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But in your passionate argument for the teachers, Matthew, you forgot the second part of my question.
Oh, go ahead. Remind me.
No, maybe you did answer it. Perhaps I'm being unjust. But are there some key characteristics that you have seen that make a really good tutor?
Yeah, I think this was part of the discussion we were having before. I do fervently believe that there are people in this world who are born just with an inherent native ability to be good teachers. And I would always encourage those sorts of people to go and be trained and really immerse themselves in the science of pedagogy and really get out what it can be to maximize their inherent ability. That's obviously a gift that they've got. First and foremost, I don't know whether that's leading me down a garden path, but I think one of the attributes of a good tutor is subject knowledge and content knowledge. That's just a standard. Second of all, I think there is an argument to be said that, so for example, when I started teaching, I remember teaching one particular topic, and for love nor money, my kids weren't getting it, my students weren't getting it. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I had to really go, thankfully, I had the platform to evaluate my practice, where I could really unpick everything and go, okay, they're not getting it because they believe this preconception, which is a misconception. So I need to dismantle that before I can even start building, right? And so I think a good tutor will inherently have to be able to spot that straight off the bat. And I think that generally comes with experience, and somebody who's been tutoring for a long time will start seeing that. And I also think that someone who can strike the balance between encouragement and building confidence, as well as sort of laying a line of authority and discipline, is a really useful one. You want your student to be wanting to do well, not necessarily for you, but for themselves. But in the first instance, it's really useful if they want to do well for you, because then you can then push that back onto, actually, you're doing well for you, student, not necessarily for your teacher. But whatever it is, you actually just want the students to start going, no, I've got to do my bit of extra homework, or I've got to understand that, or I've got to have revised this little thing because I know I've got a little test coming up. I really want to do well. So, I think a tutor who can evoke that in a student is onto a winner there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for that kind of one of the huge benefits of tutoring, which is setting your student up for a lifetime of interest in learning, not necessarily academics, but in learning. So if you're able to instill a bit of discipline for that in them, then you're setting them up not just to achieve well in their upcoming exams, but also to always have that ability to want to learn more and to go further.
Yeah. But the ability to want to, but also the ability with the variety of tools that you give them, like, you know, even if it is a revision strategy or the knowledge of how to go about conducting research. Oh, I don't know what the answer is. What am I going to do to go and figure that out? Just a manner in which they can achieve and access. That's I think probably the biggest why of any teacher, really.
And now a few words from last week's guest, Amy Solon.
I've been out of the formal education system for quite some time, and participating in the podcast was a great opportunity to reflect on what's going well within the system, but also a good chance to reflect on how we can best support young people and, of course, educators as well in areas where there are challenges. So thank you for creating a space where we can bat those ideas around and hopefully give others food for thought also. For any potential future guest to the podcast, well, I would definitely recommend getting involved. Ludo is a most engaging host and it was loads of fun. Thank you so much again for having me.
Now, Matthew, I'm afraid this is we are drawing to a close.
Oh, that's fine.
It feels like these conversations go so quickly. You've really packed a lot into that, Matthew. There is so much experience behind what you're saying, and you are speaking to such a huge proportion of the tutoring industry, both parents and students, and also fellow tutors, and even fellow agency leaders. There's so many tips about how to create a good culture of a business. I've got two kind of final questions to ask. The first is, I presupposed it in the kind of brief bio introduction I gave you at the start, but have you brought your acting skills into a tutoring session before? Are there any sort of famous memories you have of where you really thought, God, I was able to make that session come alive because of, you know?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm laughing because one of the things that my fellow teachers would say to me, and or parents would say to me, once I'd finished a lesson or a tutoring session, would be, "Oh my gosh, I was literally like a full-on musical in there." Not that I sing, by the way, but it just I think yeah, there's a lot of energy, and one of the things I really enjoy making sure that I do in a lesson or a tutoring session is if I am doing too much work, then I'm doing it wrong. And I really mean that. So the rough proportion I give is 80% of work should be that of the students and about 20% should be mine whilst I'm having a tea and a biscuit. No, you know, this is slightly tongue in cheek, but is there an anecdote? Yeah, I guess there's one section in the biology specification, which is classification. And I guess I used to get my students to do like a charade thing with outlining what the characteristics of each sort of phylum or kingdom they had to represent. And so I had kids very much coming up pretending to be starfish or octopus or whatever it might have to be. It was always a lesson that went down quite well.
Yeah, that's. I wonder if the kids ever found out or ever came across any of the films you were in and came running back in the next day. I saw Mr. C in, you know, this. So I saw Mr. C in that. I think that's an exciting. You always want, as a kid, you always kind of you hold your teachers often in this kind of hero-like standing, don't you? And to see them on TV, I remember. There was a teacher at our school who'd been on TV the night before, you know, on the BBC News, and everyone came running back in the next day. Being, I saw Mr. So-and-so.
Oh, really?
I think that's always quite a kind of inspiring.
Yeah. No, I remember. So I'd left the classroom, but not that long, and I'd been in a San Miguel commercial. And it was a San Miguel commercial that sort of passed in the cinemas in front of Casino Royale. So it was very, very visible. And I was absolutely inundated in Facebook requests from my students' parents or things like that. They're like, oh my God, you're famous. I mean, I'm not famous, it's just a commercial, but it was always, it was very sweet. Very sweet to be remembered a couple of years after I left the classroom.
Yeah. And maybe this feeds into my final question, Matthew, which is what's next for you personally? What's next for Matthew Curnier?
Yeah, I think for Matthew Curnier, the next step is I want to continue the good work that we're doing at Capital Tuition Group. We've got a really exciting year ahead where we're working with more and more schools. And that's really important to me for several reasons. One is that we are able to give what I would consider really top quality tuition to the masses. And that's always been something that's quite near and dear to my heart. So I just want to keep on doing that. And there's a few little things in the pipeline that we're also sort of working on. One is a project with another tutoring company called Tea Time Tutors. That's about to kick off. Find out more about that by all means. And then there's another one that I quite like. We sort of launched a pilot on that last year, and I often get parents of A-level students who ring up and they're saying, oh yeah, they're doing biology, chemistry, and French for A-level. And through the conversation, when they're looking for a tutor, I ask them, so what's the next step? You know, what are you going into? Is it the AIM University or an apprenticeship, or what are we looking for? And often the answer that I get is, we have no idea, ... but we think it might be something in the world of, I don't know, veterinary science, or a translator for, medical journals, or something in the region of that. So whenever I have been able to, what we're trying to do at Capital Tuition Group is just get a link for that student with an industry professional. Now, at the moment, it's just industry professionals that I know, or that any members of my team might know. And we just sort of match them up, and student gets to talk to a vet for 20 minutes. And that's a complimentary service that we offer, just so that they can see what on earth they're doing these A-levels for, what the next step is. A bit of a motivational tool, but also as a bit of a, again, like I said earlier on in the show, a bit of a signpost to go, oh yeah, that is actually what I really want to do. That's be amazing. So we, historically we've done it for physiotherapists or sports rehab therapists or radiologists, radiographers, doctors. I think we've also done it for artists as well. So we're sort of getting, a few more bites of this, and I think people are becoming more and more interested. But I think it's maybe a service that isn't available. I know we have careers advice, but it's just something that, because it's so theoretical, right? If you're an A-level student, oh, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it might be, or a potter or whatever. It's just an idea, and it's not based necessarily in reality unless they've been exposed to someone in their immediate circle who is that person. So it's just trying to provide that opportunity for those students, and also parents, because I think parents get to, I think we expect a lot from parents as well, and they're supposed to know a lot of stuff that they don't naturally know. So that's another little thing that we're testing out.
That sounds like it's got real legs, that one, because does seem to be an area where there's a bit of a gap, isn't there, between the end of school or the start of university and the career. There's just that kind of, right, you're meant to get through that as both student and parent, exactly.
Yeah.
Our parents meant to know exactly where their children are meant to go professionally. So, really, really cool stuff. Matthew, thank you so much for taking us through your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for having me on. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been really, really enjoyable, Matthew. If people want to reach out to you straight after this, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, just go on to our website, which is capitaltuitiongroup.com, capital with an A, like the capital of a country, or you can reach out to us on any of our channels, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can tell that I don't deal with any of these. I'm struggling to come up with the names of them. No, but we've got a really fantastic marketing manager who sort of deals with that. So by all means, get in touch with us through any of those channels, and also our phone numbers on the website. So just give us a call.
Brilliant. Matthew, thank you very much. That was really a very valuable episode, and we will see all of you listeners next time. So for one final time, Matthew, thank you very much for.
Thank you indeed. Have a good day,
and we'll speak again soon. Cheerio.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor Podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor.